April 30th, 1942. Duxford Airfield, England. Ronald Harker taxied onto the runway, feeling the familiar tension before a first flight in an unfamiliar aircraft. The Rolls-Royce test pilot hadn't flown here on official business. Curiosity had brought him. He'd even brought his wife along, renting a car for the trip. The American P-51 Mustang fighter, with its Allison engine, sat on the apron, gleaming polished aluminum. The squadron commander, impressed by the aircraft's maneuverability, had invited Harker to evaluate the newcomer from across the ocean. Takeoff was swift. At low altitudes, the Mustang flew like a dream, 30 miles per hour faster than the British beloved Spitfire, with twice the range. But when Harker climbed above 15,000 feet, the magic vanished. The Allison engine gasped like a climber without an oxygen mask. Power dropped. The aircraft lost its advantage. Upon landing, Harker knew he had just tested an aircraft that could change the war, but not in its current form. The problem was obvious to any aviation engineer in 1942. The single-stage supercharger of the Allison V-1710 worked excellently at ground level, but at combat altitudes where air battles unfolded over Europe, it turned the elegant fighter into a heavy duck. German Focke-Wulf 190s and Messerschmitt Bf 109s shot down American bombers with impunity at altitudes of 23,000 to 30,000 feet, where the Allies couldn't provide escort. In his memo to management, Harker was laconic: "Fit a Merlin 61 and you've got a winner." Rolls-Royce reacted instantly. By June 1942, in the secret workshops at Hucknall, engineers began converting 5 Mustang fighters, transforming them into Mustang X prototypes. This wasn't simply an engine swap. The Merlin 60 series, with its 2-stage supercharger, designed by the brilliant Stanley Hooker, weighed 300 pounds more than the Allison. The center of gravity shifted. Cooling required radical redesign. Mechanics worked by hand, fitting custom mounts, designing a new chin air intake under the nose, reconfiguring the cooling system. The Merlin's 2-stage supercharger demanded more cooling. The standard Mustang radiator simply couldn't cope. They had to redesign the entire air intake beneath the fuselage, adding an intercooler. While the British tinkered with prototypes, a parallel drama unfolded across the ocean. Major Thomas Hitchcock, U.S. military attaché in London, was himself captivated by the Merlin Mustang idea. He bombarded Washington with dispatches, while Rolls-Royce shared calculations with North American Aviation. The numbers were dizzying. Projected speed, 441 miles per hour at 25,600 feet. This would transform a mediocre tactical reconnaissance aircraft into a potential king of the skies. On July 25, 1942, even before the first British prototype took to the air, NAA received permission to convert 2 fighters. They would use the license-built Merlin from Packard Motor Company, which the Americans designated V-1650-3. Initially called the XP-78, the project was soon renamed XP-51B. NAA engineers faced the same devilish details. The carburetor had to be relocated from bottom to top to service the Merlin's updraft intake system. The radiator air intake beneath the fuselage became noticeably deeper, protruding 2 inches. A 4-blade Hamilton standard propeller replaced the 3-blade unit. Early tests revealed a chemical reaction between different metals in the cooling system and glycol coolant. The radiator clogged. They had to urgently design a new one. The risk was colossal. In August 1942, 3 months before the prototype's first flight, the U.S. Army Air Forces had already ordered 400 production P-51Bs. The bet was made blindly, on faith in engineering genius and combat necessity. On October 13, 1942, Flight Lieutenant R.T. Shepard, Rolls-Royce chief test pilot, lifted the first Mustang X, AL-975, into the sky over Hucknall. By November, the aircraft reached 413 miles per hour at full boost and 391 miles per hour on medium boost. But most impressive was the ceiling, 40,600 feet. The second prototype, AM-208, accelerated to 433 miles per hour at 22,000 feet. On November 30, 1942, test pilot Bob Chilton lifted the first American XP, P-51B into the air at Inglewood, California. 45 minutes of flight changed everything. At 29,000 feet, the speedometer showed 441 miles per hour, exactly 100 miles per hour faster than the Allison could deliver. Rate of climb doubled. Pilot ace Bud Anderson would later write in his memoir, "The Mustang flew like hell because the Merlin had tremendous guts and felt equally at home high or low, thanks to the two-stage supercharger." The U.S. Army Air Forces, desperately needing a long-range escort fighter, immediately increased the order to 2,200 aircraft. Production ramped up at wartime speed. NAA's giant Inglewood plant completely reoriented to the Mustang, shifting B-25 Mitchell production to Kansas City. In Dallas, Texas, they built a second plant for the P-51C, identical to the P-51B, but with a different factory designation. Packard in Detroit and Continental in Muskegon stamped out Merlins by the thousands. The first production P-51B took flight on May 5, 1943. By winter 1943 to 44, aircraft began reaching the 8th and 9th Air Forces in Europe. Results exceeded the boldest expectations. With additional 85-gallon tanks behind the pilot seat, sacrificing balance for range, the Mustang could escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back, 750 miles combat radius. For the first time, American B-17s and B-24s had reliable cover for the entire route. Bomber losses, reaching catastrophic 25% during unescorted raids, dropped sharply. On March 6, 1944, P-51 Mustangs escorted a daylight raid on Berlin for the first time. Air superiority, which seemed an unattainable dream in 1942, became reality in 1944. In total, over 15,000 P-51 Mustangs were produced, more than half with the Merlin engine. But numbers don't reflect the main point. This aircraft changed the very concept of air warfare. Before the Mustang, daylight strategic bombing without horrendous losses seemed impossible. After, air superiority became a matter of time. The story of the P-51 engine swap is a classic American saga of innovation with a British accent. One test pilot, a half-hour flight, a memo to management. Teams of mechanics working in secret workshops on both sides of the Atlantic, hand-fitting mounts and radiators. Engineers risking reputation and contracts, betting on unproven prototypes. Ronald Harker lived to 90, but remained forever in history as the man who put the Merlin in the Mustang. Major Thomas Hitchcock died in an air crash in April 1944, just 2 months before the Normandy landings, an operation the P-51 Mustang helped make possible by winning the skies over Europe. When pilots of the Red Tails from the 332nd Fighter Group Tuskegee, the first African-American aviators in the U.S. Army Air Forces, escorted bombers over enemy territory, their distinctive red tails on Mustang fighters became symbols of protection and mastery. They flew more than 15,000 sorties, proving that courage and skill have no color. Sometimes one engine truly changes history. Sometimes a duck truly transforms into an eagle. And sometimes all it takes for revolution is a curious test pilot, a half-hour flight, and faith in the impossible. Before swap, P-51A with Allison maximum speed 410 miles per hour at 10,000 feet, service ceiling 31,000 feet. After swap, P-51B divided by C with Merlin maximum speed 441 miles per hour at 25,000 to 30,000 feet. Service ceiling 42,000 feet. Combat radius increased from 300 miles to 750 miles with drop tanks. Total P-51s produced with Merlin, over 14,000 aircraft. First flight to Berlin, March 6, 1944. One British engine in an American airframe. One idea, two countries, countless lives saved. Thus a legend was born.